Kareem was a man marked by the heavy weight of his past, known throughout the village not just for his work as a gravedigger, but for the deep, unsettling limp that slowed his every step. His limp was more than just a physical ailment. It was a constant reminder of a terrible secret he carried alone. For 20 years, he had toiled in the graveyard, digging holes for the dead, but there was one grave he never spoke about. One night that haunted his dreams and filled his waking hours with dread. It was said in hushed tones that Kareem had once buried a living person by mistake, or worse, knowingly, and the consequences of that act had never left him. This rumor surrounded him like a shadow, but no one dared to question him directly. His limp was said to be a curse, a physical manifestation of the punishment handed down to him by forces beyond human understanding. Villagers whispered that the spirit of the living person he buried had marked him, binding his soul to the graveyard forever. Despite the whispers and fearful glances, Kareem continued his work in silence, his movements slow and deliberate. Every time he stepped onto the cold, damp soil, he felt the weight of his crime pull him deeper into the earth. His hands trembled slightly when he held the shovel, as if the ground itself warned him of what was to come. No one knew the full story, but the fear in Kareem's eyes told a story of betrayal, regret, and a curse that might never be broken. That night, the village was shrouded in darkness, with thick clouds blotting out the moon and stars. Rain fell, steadily, each drop tapping against the earth like a slow, relentless drumbeat. The wind howled through the trees, bending their branches and scattering leaves in chaotic swirls. Amidst this storm, Kareem was given a grave task, digging a new grave for a coffin that no one had seen brought into the village. The urgency came from the village imam, who insisted the burial be carried out immediately, despite the storm's fury. There was something unsettling about the secrecy surrounding this burial. No funeral procession, no mourners, no prayers heard from the mosque. Only the imam's stern command and the pressing need to bury the unknown occupant. Kareem approached the graveyard with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. The soil was soft and slick from the rain, making the digging slower and heavier than usual. As he worked, the sounds of the storm masked the quiet, eerie noises that seemed to come from the ground itself. The grave was deeper than usual, as if the occupant demanded more space beneath the surface. With each shovelful of wet earth, Kareem's mind raced with questions. Who is this person? Why the secrecy? Why the sudden urgency? The absence of answers made the night feel heavier and the air thicker with unease. Kareem's breath came in visible puffs, mixing with the cold rain that soaked his clothes. The storm's wildness seemed to echo the turmoil growing inside him. This was no ordinary burial. Something about this night felt wrong, as if the earth beneath him was holding its breath, waiting for something to break free. The rain's rhythm quickened, pounding harder against the trees and tombstones, as if nature itself was trying to warn Kareem of the horrors buried below Dot as Kareem's shovel pierced the damp earth. A faint tapping echoed from beneath the freshly turned soil. At first, it was barely noticeable, a subtle rhythmic sound, like someone lightly drumming their fingers on a wooden surface. The noise seemed out of place amid the howling wind and relentless rain, drawing Kareem's full attention. He paused, mid-dig, his breath catching in his throat, and pressed his ear closer to the cold ground. The tapping grew more distinct, almost deliberate, as if a trapped presence was trying to make contact from the darkness below. The sensation was unnerving. The soil felt alive beneath his hands, vibrating with a hidden energy that defied explanation. Along with the tapping came a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakably human. The voice was desperate, strained, and chilling, calling out his name in a soft, pleading tone. Kareem, get me out. I can't breathe. The words sent, a shiver racing down his spine, freezing his blood. Kareem's mind raced. This couldn't be real. The coffin had not yet been buried. How could there be someone alive trapped beneath the earth? He struggled to dismiss the thought as his imagination, yet the urgency in the voice was undeniable. His fingers trembled as he gripped the shovel tighter, torn between fear and duty. The tapping continued, now accompanied by a subtle movement beneath the soil. The ground seemed to pulse rhythmically, as if a living thing was struggling to break free. Kareem's heart pounded louder than the storm around him. The wind's howl faded into the background as his focus narrowed to the eerie sounds beneath the surface. He glanced around, but the graveyard was empty, shadows stretching like fingers across the wet grass. Time slowed, every second dragged on with suffocating weight. Kareem's breath came in shallow gasps, his mind gripped by a primal fear that clawed at his resolve. The feeling of being watched crept over him, as though unseen eyes bore into his very soul from the depths below. Suddenly, the shovel twitched in his hand, moving as if pulled by an invisible force. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and Kareem knew that what lay beneath was not just a lifeless corpse, but something far more sinister and alive, waiting to be unleashed. Kareem summoned every ounce of courage as he lifted the heavy wooden lid of the coffin, his heart pounding so fiercely it seemed to echo through the silent graveyard. What he saw inside was far from what he had expected, a sight that froze the blood in his veins and shattered any hope of normalcy. The woman lying there was breathing, alive, yet her appearance was grotesque beyond imagination. Her skin had been peeled away in places, revealing raw flesh and bone beneath, as if some cruel force had clawed at her face. Her eyes were not the warm, human eyes Kareem was used to seeing. Instead, they were ghostly white, void of pupils, like two hollow wells staring into the abyss. The faint rise and fall of her chest was a chilling reminder that despite her horrific condition, she was very much alive. But it was her smile that terrified Kareem most, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched from ear to ear, filled with madness and malevolence. It was not a smile of joy or kindness, but one that spoke of a sinister hunger and a dangerous power lurking within her. As she slowly turned her head towards him, the woman's voice, cold and raspy, broke the heavy silence. Kareem, now it's your turn to live beneath the earth. The words sent a shockwave through him, freezing his limbs and stealing his breath. He wanted to recoil, to run, but something invisible held him captive. Her fingers, sharp and skeletal like blades, reached out and gripped his limp leg with a terrifying strength. The pain shot through him like a bolt of lightning, and he felt as though his leg was being torn from his body. Kareem's instinct was to scream, to fight back, but his voice was trapped deep within his throat, swallowed by the growing darkness. Suddenly, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the graveyard in stark white flashes, and the flickering light revealed her face contorted with a dreadful hunger. Just as quickly as the lightning struck, the lights in the room went out. Darkness swallowed everything, leaving Kareem alone with the cold grip pulling him down into the earth. He felt the world slip away beneath his feet, the soil closing in around him like a suffocating shroud. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was her unblinking eyes and that terrifying smile, an eternal reminder that he was now trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The early morning light cast a pale glow over the village graveyard, where the storm had just passed, leaving behind a heavy silence that felt almost unnatural. A small group of villagers cautiously approached the freshly dug grave, their faces filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. They expected to find a sealed coffin resting beneath the earth, but instead, what lay before them was something far more disturbing. There, lying on the cold ground, was Kareem himself. His body was sprawled awkwardly, eyes wide open as if frozen in shock, staring blankly at nothing. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost ghostly, and stretched across his lips was a horrifying grin, the same twisted smile that had haunted the village's nightmares. Those who looked at him felt a chill run down their spines, sensing that this was no longer the man they once knew. The light in Kareem's eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, empty darkness that seemed to swallow his very soul. His limp remained, but it no longer seemed like a simple injury. It was a symbol of the curse that had claimed him. Whispers quickly spread through the villagers. This was no longer Kareem, but a shadow trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. The air around the grave grew colder, and an eerie silence settled over the cemetery. Some claimed to hear faint murmurs rising from the earth itself, voices caught in a liminal space between life and death. The villagers realized that Kareem's fate was a dire warning. The curse that had taken hold of him was far from over. It threatened to consume anyone who dared to disturb the graveyard's secrets. Night after night, those who passed near the grave reported hearing unsettling whispers, a chilling call that seemed to come from beneath the ground. Kareem, now it's your turn. The graveyard had transformed from a place of rest into a dark threshold, and Kareem had become its eternal prisoner, trapped in a nightmare that refused to end.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.